I don't know exactly who needs to hear this, but actually, the point of Cardano governance should be to not create a banana republic. If you're just fine with the banana republic as long as there's a minister of pumping your bags, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Who's here? Brian Packard's here. Good evening. Eric Williams is here. Fly Over Me is here. Guinness Speaks says amen. Hardy Bananas in a spacesuit. Yep. Neo Chad is here. Hilldog's here. Let's go, Hilldog. Ira Bliss says, you broke my socks, dude. Okay. Hey, Army, I had an experience today. Redeeming midnight would be a paragraph. Is it okay to share? No private info. Yeah, go for it. Absolutely go for it. Bella Butterfly says, let's go. Vamos. Let's go. Banana Monkey, Bored Apes, or Nano Banana. We have no Nano Banana included. No Nano Banana included in this one. Otis Fricho's here. Let's go. Pucky Hawk's here. Says, my dogs love bananas. This would be like finding the treasure to them. Nice. Emilio says go. Yeah, let's go, Emilio. Daniel Wiggins says, let's fucking bananas. That's right. Buying the dip, says Chalk Milk. Frazik is here. Let's go. Anybody scoop up Night at 5.2 cents a couple days ago? I missed it because of my broken internet, says Brown Beardo. Dolphy Wolf is here. Good morning. Yes, let's change the world. Altcoin Daily clipped the spicy bits of Charles's talk and got the rest of crypto fired up. Yep, I can believe that happened. It was apparently the spicy rant where he talks about not signing up to seed the revolution to big banks. Yep, that's a good one. Charles is good on that talking point. We've heard it many times before. It's probably good for the rest of crypto to hear it for sure. Good morning, Mission Zambia. Good morning. Obviously, crypto's here. Hi. Hey, how's it going? James Syracuse is here. What's up? Brian Beardo says, yes. Sounds like the Sunday vid. Otis Frichov arrived at 11. Okay, that's good to know. Anybody, let me know if the intro was clipped for you. I think I've got like an 18-second countdown, and I'm hoping that's sufficient. But let me know if the intro was clipped at all for you and you missed any of it. Let's go, Joe Davidson. Okay, let's talk about this. So, it's like, I think this happens a lot to us in Cardano, right? We've, a lot of us, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us over the years have certainly heard all of the mini Charles rants, and a lot of things he says are novel takes on things that people have kind of always believed in crypto. Like, we shouldn't cede the revolution to banks, right? It's never been something we actually had to confront really before now. Back in 2014, the banks didn't really give a damn, but we still talked about it. One day the banks are going to want in on this. And, of course, the attitude then was very heavily, let's not cede the revolution to banks. And there are a lot of things that go along with this, right? It's like, if we're building, some new economic rails in crypto and in Cardano, we, are probably going to need some governance. And you would think it goes without saying, we should not follow in the footsteps of banana republics. And I'm not picking on any nation states in tropical zones here. You all know what I mean. We've got banana republics in very non-tropical places as well. They're all over the world. We just use this term. So not picking on any country that is capable of growing bananas. Good for you guys. I'm jealous. All the countries that cannot grow bananas are jealous of you. They're always awesome places to visit. Well, not always, but often they're awesome places to visit. We're jealous. We're jealous of your tropical atmosphere. But banana republics, I'm not jealous of. And I don't think we should build one inside Cardano or inside crypto. Crypto should strive not to build banana republics. But the problem with crypto, one of the problems with crypto is we're still dealing with human beings here. And what do human beings like to do? They like to collect up influence and power. That's what human beings like to do. Even if they don't set out to do that, they'll often, accidentally on purpose make the choice that leads in that direction. Okay, let's get some more readings here. Brown Beardo was 15 seconds. Obviously, crypto's 18. Okay, good. That's what the very start. Emilio had 7 seconds. Okay. Started with who needs to, okay, you missed I don't. You just missed 2 words, Mission Zambia. Okay, that's pretty good. Flying Hambones here. Let's go. Crams Rabe is here. G'day. Trezor checked every step. Okay, this is Hill Dog's midnight collecting up his midnight narrative. The official Glacier site. Okay, so Trezor checked every step. The official Glacier site redeemed. Nothing came to me, but my total night allocation grew by my first tranche amount. Like the smart contract received the night, not me. Ooh, I don't know. That doesn't sound good. I don't know what's going on there. That does not sound good. Did you by chance, let me ask, use another address as sort of the collection address? I know a lot of us did that. I definitely did it when that function became available. A lot of us said, hey, I've got a bunch of addresses. I'm going to send it all to this one address. I would check that first, see if that's what happened there. Phil says, looking forward to this discussion. Okay, great. In other words, the Glacier portal grew by the amounts supposed to receive today. Yeah, that sounds to me like you had another address that was going to receive the night from that address. Greetings, Omar Wright. Thank you for joining. Sub-Zero says some of those are King Kong nanners. Yeah, I mean, those are too big. Some of those are too big even to be plantains for sure. G'day from the People's Socialist Republic of Australia. I try hard not to mock some of the things I see going on in certain other countries, right? Some countries I feel like are just fair game and I'm going to mock everything they do that's ridiculous. There are some countries I try not to mock the ridiculous stuff I see. This may be one of them, but it always makes me feel better when I see somebody from one of the socialist republics of the Five Eyes countries. When I see one of the Five Eyes countries, a citizen of one of the Five Eyes countries, and they realize they are on the same page as me, understanding how ridiculous it is, or viewing it as ridiculous, at least, it makes me feel a little bit better. Emilio says banana allergic. Fair enough. I'm a carnivore, so I don't eat bananas anymore. Once upon a time, I did. I guess I never ate a ton of them, but I've had them in my life. Banana Republic of Bermuda is going balls deep into crypto, evidently. Yeah, we covered that a little bit last night. Brian Armstrong and Coinbase. Looks like they facilitated that one. I don't think the banana is in the carnivore diet. Yep, exactly. Trolltol, hello. Thanks for joining. Sounds like a job for Glacier Drop support. They were great for me during the scavenger mine. May want to reach out. Oh, there you go, Hill Dog. That sounds good. Mock away, we're toast. Okay, fair enough. What do you think about Justin Mullen's post on BTC compromise security over the next few halvings? I'll have to read it. Ahead of time, I'll say I don't necessarily agree with a lot he says. I don't really pay attention to a lot he says because so many things in the past have just weren't accurate from my perspective. I don't want to get into a big thing, but they weren't accurate from my perspective. I'll put it that way. So I don't really pay much attention to what he writes. I can already kind of imagine what it's going to be just based on the topic. But if I come across it, I'll take a look for sure. Oh, that actually made me cough. Meat bananas are not what we're looking for. Sorry, that made me cough. Just the thought of meat bananas. I don't know if it was because I liked the idea of a meat banana or it was repulsive to me, but I started coughing. Phil says, Josh Mick, come to Western Australia. We are planning to secede. I like the sounds of that. I definitely have watched some spearfishing videos in Western Australia, so I kind of like the sounds of that. Sadly, I like banana flavored runts better than actual bananas. Fair enough. I'd feel better if ADO was back over $1, to be honest. I feel like crypto as a whole is ignoring the entire ecosystem. I feel like the globe is ignoring the entire crypto ecosystem, and then the entire crypto ecosystem is ignoring Cardano as usual. So it's kind of like a fractal of the whole, Hola, Rulo. Thank you for joining. We only socialize the losses here in the Five Eyes. That way we can privatize the profits. Basically, maybe like the video people. What's that a reference to, Rulo? What's that a reference to? 2110 IFY. Hello. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining. Josh Mick is letting you know where he's at. I'm going to have to reach midnight on Discord. Any tips on avoiding scammers there, please? Thank you. Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, definitely try to avoid scammers. Don't give anybody your private keys, no matter what you do. Guinness Speak says, I'll say it, Trump ain't cool. Yeah, I mean, anybody on this channel can have whatever opinion they want of Trump. That administration is an administration of wild boys. And I think a reasonable person can like what they do or not like what they do. So no one will I will not dislike anyone regardless of their opinion on that topic. I think reasonable people can have various opinions on that. Rulo says 50 watching, need more likes. Maybe like the video, people. Okay, yeah. Okay, now I understand your comment. Thank you for that. I appreciate it, Rulo. There you go. See, look at this. Army of Spies meeting up, even in Australia. I appreciate that. Probably especially in Australia, because we have a lot of Australian listeners. So Army of Spies meeting up. I'll take it wherever we can get it. Yep. People will have different opinions. Yeah, it's okay to have different opinions on the current administration in Washington. I think I have different opinions from day to day on them. So anyone that DMs you is a scammer on their Discord. Yep, that's a good red flag. That's a good red flag. The Nonana Republic of America. So this is actually, the US is actually not the banana republic this is about, if you can believe that, right? Because we talk about political things here because they often impact the markets, and especially, of course, I like to talk about the IR things, the international relations things. Some of you like to call that geopolitics. I like to talk about those things very much. So we talk about those things, but this is actually not about the US. Yeah, people can have whatever opinion. You can have whatever opinion you want. Everybody can think whatever they want about this. Without Trump, crypto would be on its way to illegal. Yep. See, we got people on both sides of it. I kind of like that. Ayo, thank you for another rundown. Jay Coco, thanks for joining. Okay, let's jump into it here. Let's get to the real thing before we get too deep on US domestic politics, because there are plenty of podcasts about that, plenty of videos you can watch on that. So here's what we're really talking about. So I am, of course, concerned about the state of the government of the nation state I live in, but I'm also today more concerned about, at all times, no matter what administration, I'm concerned about the US government. But today I'm concerned about the Cardano government. So I wrote this little article. We talked about some of this yesterday, but the more I thought about it today and the more I saw everybody else's reactions to this, yesterday when I was talking about the Cardano Constitution and the bad things about this draft of the Cardano Constitution, the more I thought about it, the more I saw other people's reactions, I realized this is probably a bigger issue that requires a more in-depth look, right? A more in-depth explanation of why this was a step backwards. And in my opinion, this really was a step backwards for Cardano governance. If you think about it, right? We tend to focus, in crypto especially, we tend to focus on intention, and we sort of put people in these camps like, this person has good intentions, this person's a bad scammer, this person rug pulled, this person's good, this person's bad. And oftentimes that perception gets rug pulled, right? All of a sudden some drama explodes and it turns out somebody who everybody thought was great, maybe the people around them reveal something that's dissatisfying in some way. That's not what happened here. But what I'm saying is we tend to in crypto, we tend to silo people into camps of good and bad based on what we think their intentions are. So sometimes you have to put the intentions thing aside and just ask, what's the actual result? Because the road to hell is definitely paved with good intentions, right? People with very good intentions can lead you to very, very bad hellscapes, right? And I would say Cardano becoming a banana republic would be it would be an intellectual hellscape for me. I would never want that. That would be very extremely troubling, right? And the slippery slope toward banana republic, it's built it's built on pavers of degradation of institutions, right? If you start chipping away at checks and balances, what you arrive at is something that starts looking like a banana republic. At the bottom of that slippery slope, I know I'm mixing metaphors terribly here, talking about pavers and slippery slopes. Obviously, pavers, not usually slippery. But at the bottom of that slippery slope, you may find yourself at a banana republic, and you realize, hey, we just spent the last several years just chipping away at the checks and balances that the Cardano Constitutional Convention built and were enacted at the Constitutional Convention in Buenos Aires. You know, we may realize after a couple of years, wow, everybody just fucking voted yes on all these governance actions. And the end result was that we chipped away at all the checks and balances in the government until we were left with pretty much just the will of the DReps. And oh, we totally forgot that a handful of DReps control the vote. And if they vote for something, it's probably going to pass. So you end up at this banana republic by accident if you don't pay attention to what's going on. What happened with this new constitution in Cardano, and everything I say in this video, I'm not trying to be harsh or mean, but it's important we be honest about this shit. We can't sugarcoat everything just because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. This was done in a very amateur way that really hurt the process, right? In order to do something as complicated as amend the Cardano Constitution, right? It's simple to do. You can just make amendments willy-nilly, however you like. That part's simple. But doing it so that there aren't bad after effects, that part's complicated. And the DReps really need to fucking understand what they're voting for, right? If a proposal is written in a way that the DReps can't possibly be expected to understand what's going on, you're going to have bad results. So step one of changing the system of governance in any system is the people voting on the policy, the people making the policy need to understand what the hell they're voting for, right? Unfortunately, in Cardano, we don't have professional legislators. The people making policy aren't getting paid. That means most of them can't do it full time. They don't have time. They don't have time to research everything like they're some kind of, constitutional law professor at some law school. They don't have that time or knowledge, right? They may not even understand how legal provisions work together. So you have to do certain things. And the most important among those things is you have to present the changes in a way that people can understand them. And that's the first thing that went very wrong in this process. So Brown Beardo says to Hill Dog, you should get on the Discord anyway, but hit up support through the official Glacier Drop site. Yep, that sounds like a good plan. Thomas Kirkpatrick, thanks for joining. Streetwise says it's also built on misguided appeal for decisive action, just comes at a steep cost. China can build 20 airports while London quibbles for 20 years about a runway at Heathrow. Yeah, you can make too few decisions. Many ways you can screw up this whole governance thing. Definitely making too few decisions is one of them. People have difficulty distinguishing their best interest from the best interest of the common good. Yep. So this is certainly true. So I would say this Cardano Constitution, it's not really a tragedy of the commons, because I think in a lot of ways people were actually voting, as Frazak is implying, they were kind of voting against their own best interest, right? And their own best interest is actually the same as the common good in this case, but everybody kind of has gotten in this habit. Not everybody, I'm just speaking in generalities here, but a lot of DReps, I guarantee you, didn't know what they were voting for here because it was very complicated. So let's jump into it. Let me read you part of this article. This is long. I'm going to try not to make it dry, but I think it's important that people understand, understand what happened here. So I'm saying this new version of the Cardano Constitution is actually worse and creates at least one huge new flaw that didn't exist before. Let me explain. In the name of simplification, the new Constitution has created substantial ambiguity around the Constitutional Committee's ability to carry out its only job, enforcing the Constitution. How did this happen? Amateurish style proposal of the amendment meant that many of the DReps wouldn't actually understand the changes for which they were voting. We talked about this a little bit last night, but I thought I should put this in print because there are many, many people who might see this article, but will never listen to last night's video. So here is the way you edit a legal document so that a reader can just read through the paragraph, understand what's being deleted, what's being inserted, and what's remaining from the original draft. You can just read this and understand what edits are being made. This is not going to be a surprise to very many of you. If you've ever looked at a track changes document in your life, you already know that this is a much better way to understand the edits in a document, right? This is not going to be unfamiliar to most of you. So you can see how the deletions and insertions are very obvious, distinguished from the original text. This is the standard professional way to show changes, really in any kind of document, but I'll just restrict this to legal documents here. There are many different variations on this. You can use bold insertions. You can use underlined insertions. Here you can see they are color-coded and underlined. There are many different ways to do this, but it all works out the same. The reader can actually understand the changes. And I've included a link here to a full document. This is a full document, from the US Congress. This is how they do it when they, guess what, pass bills. This is like we're passing a bill. An amendment to the Constitution is basically a bill. So if you come down here, this is what we actually got. This is what we actually got. This is a screenshot that I took and included in a thread clear back in August when the first version of this amendment was included. I screenshotted this in a thread and I explained this is not the way you show changes to a legal document like this, but it's really any document. You can't tell what's going on, right? The red stuff is getting deleted. The green stuff is getting added. But because they're doing that side by side, basically two documents side by side, they end up not matching up because things are getting deleted and added. And it's not an inline tracked changes document, right? This style, you can always tell exactly what's going on. Over here, I've got something being added to some section that doesn't at all match up with this section. And I can't tell what disappeared from over here and what's being added to over here. No DRep is going to understand this. And last night on the video, I showed everybody how even if you tried to highlight this, it's going to highlight both columns. So a DRep couldn't even like highlight this, create two different documents, and then do the compare changes thing that most modern word processors can do. But let's face it, most DReps aren't going to go to that much trouble anyways. Even if it was easy to do, they're not going to do it anyways. It's really the proposer's duty to make it easy for the DReps to understand the changes, right? A DRep would have to go out somewhere and find the original Constitution, go Google up a link, and then find this changed version, and then do a compare document, use a compare document function in a word processor. In an ideal world, DReps would do that. Do we live in an ideal world? No, we do not. They're not going to fucking do that. So the end result, here's where we get back to intentions and end results. The end result is that most, we'll say some number, I would argue it's most, some number of DReps are not going to look at these changes. They're not going to understand the changes. What they're going to do is they're going to go to Tempo Vote or somewhere else where they can see who's voted for this thing. And if it looks like it's going to pass, they're going to vote yes. If it looks like everybody's voting against it, they're going to vote no. They're just going to go with the herd, right? But everybody's going with the herd, and it gets kicked off by the very biggest, often gets kicked off by the very biggest DReps. So everybody just ends up following those very biggest DReps. In this case, the very biggest DRep, who's a single person, there are larger entity DReps, but the very largest DRep, who is a single person, is the author of this amendment. So of course he's going to vote yes for it. So people assume it's going to pass, and there's just this momentum. Everybody votes yes for it. Did anybody actually look at the changes? Probably not very many, right? That's why when we do these amendments to the most important legal document in all of Cardano, we have to use this universal standard for fucking editing legal documents, right? Everybody who's ever edited an MS Word document, has probably seen this, right? If you've ever had to track changes in MS Word document, you've seen this. This is very universal, very standard, right? We should not be changing the operative document for a gigantic multi-billion-dollar ecosystem without at least employing what, is the universal standard for changing documents like this, right? And again, this is where I'm not trying to be harsh. But it's important we're honest about this. This is amateur style, right? This is rookie season. Nobody's doing this. Nobody who's serious about negotiating a legal document is doing this shit. This is how everybody does it, and there's a reason for it, right? I wouldn't be so animated about this if I hadn't shown this exact screenshot and explained why this is fucked up. Why this is a fucked up, super amateur way to do this, right? Back in August, in the first version of this, back in August, I made a thread explaining this, and the author of this proposal responded to it 4 times. He responded to that thread 4 different times. He saw the input, right? He acknowledged it 4 different times. And yet somehow in version 2, we still get this. So I have to ask the question, right? The only reason, and I say this in this article, the only reason you'd use this style is so that people don't understand the change. So people don't understand the changes in the document to obfuscate what's actually going on. That's the only reason you would do it this way. I wrote right here, see how it is extremely difficult to understand the changes being made. That's why this style of making changes is never used in legal documents. The only reason to use this style is if you actually want to obscure what changes you are making. In any standard legal negotiation, this would be considered amateurish at best, and more probably would be seen as nefarious. So we have to ask questions. When he's already been told, and he acknowledged being told that this is the worst way to do this, why did we see this again? Right? I have to ask the question if it was to obfuscate what was actually going on, right? So that the DReps wouldn't understand what changes were being made. Let's see. Don't we need good DReps to vote for how the new props are presented? So we just need the DReps to vote down proposals if they're not presented in a comprehensible way, right? Everybody should have gone in and looked at this. And I'm sure there's some people who did, who maybe took, there's probably people who took all of the changes, went out and found the original Constitution, found the new final version, and then did the compare documents thing and looked at it in this manner. We do have good DReps. Vast majority, not going to do that. They don't have the time. They're not getting paid. They're not going to do it. So the vast majority did not do that. I can guarantee you they just voted. The part of the reason I know that is the number of DReps today who are asking what's in the new Constitution. There were a large number of DReps asking what's in the new Constitution, even though they voted on it. They voted on it, but they're asking what's in the Constitution, right? So they did not know what was in it, obviously, even though they voted for it. So Phil says, Krams Rabe and I are members of the Eastern Cardinal Council. Yep, I knew that, as to at least one of you, who voted the change unconstitutional as the previous constitution. I also knew that. Thank you. Had wording that implied a more robust amendment process was required. Thank you for that. I actually read your rationale for voting against that. I appreciated it very, very much. Thank you. This new constitution removed that amendment process check. Yeah, it removed a lot of things. It's a step backwards for governance for Cardano for sure. Crypto Gypsy's here. Hey, what's up? Hey, thanks for joining. How does ETH and Sol do it? You want to know how Ethereum does it? They do not have governance. A year ago, and I believe it was January of 2025, I've covered this on the channel several times, but Vitalik put out a tweet saying he was the one who named the key personnel at the Ethereum Foundation. It was just him. He was pissed at some people because they were trying to get rid of somebody at the Ethereum Foundation. And he reminded everybody, it's just him who appoints them. There is no governance. You have dictator Vitamin Butters. People have told me that there were some changes after that and it got a little bit better, but you tell me, if you're holding ETH, tell me how many times you've been asked to vote on anything at all. Jordan for America, thanks for joining. Brown Beardo says, frankly, I ended up abstaining on this one because I was not happy with my comprehension of the changes. Thank you. That's exactly what people should have done, right? A lot of people voted who didn't understand the changes, right? And they should have done what you did, abstain, if they didn't understand the changes. So thank you for that. Thank you, D.U. I appreciate that like. Thank you very much. So, like I pointed out, I made a whole thread about this back in August 2025 in the first version of this Constitution, and explained exactly why this is a terrible way to do this. The proposer of this amended Constitution obviously read my thread, responded to it 4 times. To be fair, I don't want to be intellectually dishonest here in any way. To be fair, he did say, I need help from native English speakers, because he mentions, right, and you can just click on this link and find it. He mentions that he relies heavily on Google Translate, right? Which is okay. I don't think this is, I think this is okay. It's okay to be, obviously he's got to deal with an English document. So of course, Google Translate, good tool to use. We might argue that maybe some kind of AI program is better, but whatever. He's got some automated help on this. That's all perfectly fine. And he did say he needed help from native English speakers. What I figured at the time, back in August 2025, was that hitting the track changes button in Microsoft Word or whatever modern word processor, they chose to use, that's not an English language issue, right? It's just hitting one button. And then, as you go through and make changes, it'll track those changes, right? Very easy. Everybody who's ever edited a document like this and had to send it, for people to review has probably done this. It's one button push. It's not an English issue. So I didn't think, hey, I better get in there and make sure everybody who's around this amendment knows how to push the button, right? But that's not what happened. We ended up with this. And as a result, I don't think people really read the changes, understood the changes at least. So that's how this happened. That's the process part we got to fix. DReps, you need to vote stuff down if they can't show you a changes marked version that looks like this. If they can't show you inline changes that are comprehensible, that are readable like this, just vote no. Vote no or abstain like Brown Beardo did. If you don't understand, if you don't totally 110% understand the changes, abstain and say, I don't understand the changes. I'm going to vote abstain. Could you make this more clear? Could this be explained? More importantly, just tell them you need a version like this. Because if you read through this, you can see exactly what's getting deleted, exactly what's being added. So this is how all this happened. But now let's talk about the bad end results. So I don't know what the intentions of this amendment were. We've seen different reports. The person proposing this said, well, I did it because of this. It got kicked off because of this. Like I wanted something simpler, fewer words, whatever it was, right? But regardless of the intentions, some negative ramifications have manifested, right? The outcome was not good. So this draft contained a lot of very simple grammatical and other changes, commas and punctuations added here and there. ADA holder became ADA owner, and etc. But it also contained some changes that were claimed to be meant to simplify the governance process and do things like reduce the burden on the Constitutional Committee, right? We all, I think most of us know at this point, info actions for treasury withdrawals were gotten rid of. And the explanation was, hey, we had a Constitutional Committee seat, the holders of that seat, which was a group, they quit because they said they needed to be paid. So, one report was that the intent of this was to take that away, to take the burden off the Constitutional Committee, right? To create less burden. But here's where a lot of the trouble comes in. So let's talk about the bad ramifications of all this. So let's look at one change. So certain things were done to reduce the burden on the Constitutional Committee, like I just described. Let's look at one such change. So Article 7 of the original Constitution, and don't worry about what article and section. I'm going to mention them here, just in passing, but you don't need to know what article and section it is. But there's this Article section of the 7 of the original Constitution that describes the role of the Constitutional Committee. Section 4 of that article describes some of the voting authority of the Constitutional Committee. And hey, when we get down to it, what is the governance system? What does it really regulate? What happens when we're doing governance in Cardano? We vote on stuff. So voting is literally the most important thing. That's what governments do. It's the most important thing. So here we're talking about the most important thing that the Constitutional Committee does. And you notice this section 4 of the original version, it's long, right? This is pretty long. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. And those paragraphs contain 255 words. So there's 255 words here. Then we've got the new version. So this new version of the Constitution moves everything around and mixes up the sections. Somebody decided they didn't like the organization of things or the wording of things. They didn't like certain sections. They went through and deleted a bunch of stuff, moved other stuff around. So it's not even in the same place. It's in section 1 of article 3 now, not even in the same article, different section, but little bits and fragments of some of the stuff up here. Unfortunately, not much of it though, because when you look at this section, the first part of it is a constitutional committee shall be established. It should ensure that things are consistent with the Constitution. Each CC member shall have one vote. And then really what they get to vote on is just down here in this section, right? You can see this is pretty scant, but we'll count all of this, all the words in this, even though the first part is, just some very basic stuff. It's only 87 words total, right? And some people, maybe even some people in this watching this video right now, might argue brevity is golden, right? This is something you hear all the time from teaching assistants in college, the professor's assistants who don't want to read your damn test answers, your exam answers. They want to read the short essay, not the long essay. They would say brevity is golden, right? That is true, but it has ramifications, sometimes negative, for legal interpretation, for legal construction, right? When you do something like this, when you take 255 words, laying out all the things that a constitutional committee can vote on, and you cut it down to a third of that, 87 words, what happens is when somebody has to look at this, when this is being legally interpreted, they say, hey, all these other things were cut out. They were cut out for some reason. It wasn't just for fun. It was cut out for some reason. And then they have to start making assumptions about why those things were cut out. Up here in this one, we have things explicitly stated. The Constitutional Committee should vote on the following stuff. Down here, that's all just cut out. What we get is no governance action other than a no confidence or update committee action may be implemented without affirmation by a requisite percentage of CC members. So that's good. It's pretty open-ended. Most governance actions need a vote from the Constitutional Committee members. That all sounds good, right? Then down here we see the Constitutional Committee should be limited to voting on the constitutionality of governance actions. So now we're limiting the Constitutional Committee. The Constitutional Committee should be limited to voting on the constitutionality of governance actions. Okay, it's limiting it, but it's limiting it to what we already knew, that they just vote on the constitutionality. They don't vote on the merits of the thing. They just vote on the constitutionality of the thing. So don't lose interest here. Don't go away. It's getting a little nuanced, but I promise it's not going to get too dry or too complicated. We're going to get into the heart of what's going wrong here. So this is something that Lady of Nemu Pool pointed out yesterday quite persuasively. So they made many posts. I linked to one of the posts here that you can see. But Nemu Pool pointed out that there's a huge difference between these last paragraphs in the original version up here. These last 3 paragraphs contain a bunch of stuff the Constitutional Committee is going to vote on. And these last 2 sections of the new version, these are very different. They're having these imply that the Constitutional Committee is going to be voting on very different things under the old system and the new system. So in the old version, the original version, the Constitutional Committee has rights to vote on, among other things, the constitutionality of a suggested course of action, right? So it's stated like that in the old Constitution. The Constitutional Committee should vote on the constitutionality of a suggested course of action or a proposed budget if it were to be implemented in an info action, right? So here we're getting a little technical, but I'm going to make this make sense, so don't worry. The new version doesn't have any of that anymore. It just says the pieces I read to you earlier, that the Constitutional Committee shall vote on the constitutionality of, most governance actions, minus this small list of exceptions, right? So here's where we get into the nuance that creates all the trouble. Here's where the problem comes in. Since this new version expressly deletes the language related to suggested courses of action and proposed budgets and basically deleted the whole concept of voting on budgets, Normal legal rules of construction would require an inquiry into whether the Constitutional Committee's right to vote on the constitutionality of items like courses of action and spending implementation still exists, right? So exactly like I described to you earlier, when you delete all of this stuff, anybody trying to interpret this from a legal perspective has to ask the question, oh, it got deleted, so I assume the drafters didn't want the Constitutional Committee to have those powers, right? So I don't know if we don't know, this is the intents versus outcomes thing. We don't know if the intent of the drafter of this thing certainly wasn't me or any other DReps I know. We don't know if the intent was for that to happen, but that's what's happening because they decided to simplify and, kind of put this section through the old, through the old washing machine and reorganize it, put it in a totally different area. We don't know if that was their intention or if they were just trying to make it simpler, right? Make it simpler. Maybe that was their intention. But what we got out of it is this question now. Okay, the Constitutional Committee can vote on the constitutionality of things, but the language has been deleted that said the Constitutional Committee can vote on suggested courses of action and proposed budget items. And in fact, budgets are pretty much out entirely. So there could be this alternate reading. Somebody reading this, trying to interpret it from a legal perspective, could have a reading of this that since that language was expressly deleted, the Constitutional Committee only has a right to vote on the constitutionality of governance actions like Treasury withdrawals, as the parameters of constitutionality of a Treasury withdrawal are expressly laid out inside the four corners of the Constitution. That means, what does the document actually say about the ways in which they can vote on the constitutionality of this thing, right? So an adjudicator trying to interpret this might find themselves asking, okay, they specifically removed language allowing the CC to vote on suggested courses of action and proposed budget implementations. So what aspects of constitutionality does the Constitution expressly state the CC may vote on with respect to a Treasury withdrawal, right? So we're just picking Treasury withdrawals here, but this could apply to a lot of different things. So probably a logical interpreter of this, someone reading this, trying to figure out what it actually means legally, they'd probably come to this section. Section 7, Treasury withdrawals action standards, right? It has a bunch of requirements. Treasury withdrawal actions must, in addition to the requirements of Section 6, meet all the following requirements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Guess what the problem with this is? They're all procedural. They're all procedural. None of them actually say, hey, the withdrawal shouldn't be for a purpose that conflicts with the purpose of the Constitution and the Cardano blockchain, right? None of them actually say that. There are things like, you must specify the term of the withdrawal. You shall disclose whether the recipient has received ADA in the last 2 years. A net change limit must be in effect. You have to cover the cost of an independent audit. You must designate administrators of your withdrawal. Let's see. The withdrawal must be kept in one or more separate accounts that can be audited. It's all procedural stuff. None of it says, if someone were to look to this list and say, okay, this is the constitutionality stuff the Constitutional Committee can vote on, none of it is the purpose this money is being spent for, is it constitutional? Does it conflict with the Constitution, right? You could easily take adopt a strict interpretation of what's inside the Constitution and say, okay, the Constitutional Committee should just look at these 6 issues. We've kind of seen this in the past from CC members. They say, oh, we're just looking at, whether the hash is correct and those kinds of things. And they kind of go down a list because they're not constitutional law professors. They're normal Cardano people. They just kind of go down a list. Does it do the following things? It's very easy to envision a future where they just go down this list. Nothing on this list is, does the goal of the spending directly contradict the goal of the Constitution or the goal of the Cardano community? This is a huge fail. If these are the constitutional issues that are examined by the CC members, it's a huge fail. This is not what the Constitutional Committee should be doing, right? And that's been pointed out exactly here. Nemu Lady of the Lake Pool has a great hypothetical that explains this. Assume I do a treasury withdrawal to withdraw 1 million ADA to attack the Cardano blockchain. This is an extreme example that DReps wouldn't agree to, but that's not the point. It's a hypothetical to explain the absurdity of this. So he goes through all of those 6 points, right? Which are the only parameters for constitutionality, here within the 4 corners of the Constitution. Those are the only parameters that are laid out. And he could pass. A CC member could say, oh, yeah, you're withdrawing money to attack the Cardano blockchain. Great. You pass all 6 of these. Go ahead. Here's your money. We have to vote. Yes, it's constitutional, right? This is obviously a perversion of the process. This is not what we want to happen, but this is exactly what could happen based on the way they did this. And the problem here is that they got rid of info actions, which seems like a good idea on its face, right? It seems like an okay idea. We get rid of info actions. We don't have to vote twice on every treasury withdrawal. We just vote on the treasury withdrawal itself. But this amendment to this Constitution was done in such a willy-nilly manner. Just delete info actions, right? Whoever was doing the drafting on this, I don't know. The proposer told me they rely heavily on Google Translate, so I don't know who was helping them or what. Doesn't really matter, but they deleted info actions for treasury withdrawals, and the end result is there's no vote in this new Constitution on, there's no way for the Constitutional Committee members to vote, hey, an attack on the Cardano blockchain is obviously unconstitutional, because there's no info action where that could happen. There's just, hey, here are some parameters, check these. Right? So this is where you get into this failure when you just start, when somebody decided they don't like info actions on treasury withdrawals, they want the Constitution to be simpler. Let's just go through and we'll just delete a bunch of stuff and add a bunch of stuff, and we'll do our own little remix of the Constitution. Like, it's possible their intent was totally good, but look at the outcome. Like, what did we get out of this? What did we get out of this? Now the Constitutional Committee members only have to vote once. The DReps only have to vote once. It's pretty easy to look at the info action, vote on it, and then look at the treasury withdrawal and vote on that as well, right? Even if you absolutely didn't want to have info actions for treasury withdrawals, you could have found a better way to do this. This is a really haphazard way to do this. And, it's like a chipping away. It's that slippery slope where you start chipping away at the powers of the Constitutional Committee. You do this every year for a couple of years. Pretty soon, everything's being decided by a couple of DReps at the top. You've definitely got Banana Republic. So let's hit the comments a little bit here. I vote on making the Cardano price 20 by any means necessary. Guinness Speaks votes for 40. I like these votes. Just like in real life, it's not obvious to everyone why you need good governance until it's gone. Well put. Well put. I am an ex-super troll from the age before trolls and was forged in the fire of dad jokes. If I go find their posts, they would all regret this. Have at the internet scares me now a bit, though. People be finding other people just to hurt them. That's true. I've actually had people, when I voted no on certain stuff, I had members of certain communities who wanted money that I voted against trying to find my address. They were asking people online where they could find me. And they for the purposes you're talking about. Did you also notice the line numbers were often misaligned? Nightmare to read and compare. Yeah, absolutely. It's not readable. The changes aren't readable. No, very few of the DReps understand the flaws in this document. Streetwise, let's see. The default vote should be no. Exactly, Frazek. The default vote should be no, especially if you don't understand a proposal. Only something you agree with wholeheartedly warrants a yes. Yes, exactly. The default vote on our Constitution should be no. It should be no, right? Unless you 110% understand what the fuck is going on. And I can guarantee you, most DReps didn't understand what was going on with this amendment, right? If they understood this, they would have been like, wait, that's fucked up. You're chipping away at the authority of the Constitutional Committee. We don't want that. We have checks and motherfucking balances, right? And you're destroying the checks and balances. Streetwise says, also Charles makes a good point. Governance means we can come to consensus on where to take the ecosystem much faster than other chains. This scales with size. That's why ETH 2 years for staking. Yep, true. Were the CC asked if we needed the burden reduced? No. Good point. Here we have Phil actually on the goddamn Constitutional Committee. And he's telling you right now he was not asked if the burden needed to be reduced. Nico, hello. Hello. Thanks for joining. With no governance, ETH is essentially House Targaryen. The crypto gods will flip a coin when Vitamin Butters passes. Yep. Matt, what's up? Thanks for joining. Did the person writing this up try to confuse everyone on purpose? Are they among the five? Yes, the person who is the proposer on this amendment is the largest single person DRep by a huge margin. Huge margin. It's like a 12-year-old in English class with an assignment to fail on purpose. Yeah, I mean, this is a person who is an accountant, I think, is an accountant, doesn't have a legal background, probably a great accountant, doesn't have a legal background, and has already said they use Google Translate to help them with English, which that second part I think is okay. I think that's okay. I certainly use, automated translation products when I need to do something in a foreign language, which does happen to me. So not even for Cardano, but for other things. I wonder how many shots of Everclear this took to put together. This is a draft. No, this was adopted, Matt. This was adopted. This is your new constitution, bro. This is it. You are living under this. Not quite yet. It doesn't take effect this epic, but this is the new one. This month, this will be your constitution. Constitutional revisions need to be much more limited in scope. That will also help DReps digest each proposal. Exactly. It should be done piece by piece. There's a reason that, the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and all the subsequent amendments, it wasn't just somebody came along and was like, I'm gonna revamp this whole bitch. This whole bitch, this whole thing needs a huge revamp. I'm gonna do the whole thing in one bite, and I'm not really gonna show people the changes. I'll just let them try to figure it out, based on me lining up the two documents next to each other, and deletions, will be highlighted and on one side, and additions will be highlighted on the other. It's not how you do it. And you do it piecemeal, piece by piece, so everybody can understand what the hell's going on and they can actually discuss it. This whole let's remodel the whole house all at once in 1 month, and then people won't accept it, so we just do it again immediately. This doesn't work. This is a terrible way to do this. I'd also say these changes are much too broad and far-reaching to put into a single vote. Every change, yep, exactly what Brown Beardo just said. Each one should be a vote of its own so we can have sufficient discussion. This was a train wreck. The way this was done was a complete train wreck. We should not allow proposals that shotguns all around the Constitution, making tiny or large changes throughout, unless they are all have a very targeted intention. It's exactly like isolating variables, right? In experiments, scientific experiments. You don't change, 75 variables and then run the experiment again, right? Because then you can't examine each variable because they're all, interlinked. And here we have exactly that. So many different changes were made in so many places. Nobody was able to put the puzzle together, not even addressing the fact they couldn't actually see the changes because they weren't presented correctly. Matt, I don't like this either, man. I'm with you. Yeah. Anybody want $10 in ADA? There you go. Post your address. Ooh, oh, that's a nice offer from James. There you go. That's a very nice offer from James. If he was like some unknown person we'd never seen before, I would be like, ooh, careful while posting your address. But in this case, maybe DM it. Maybe just DM it to James. Maybe just DM it to James somehow. Maybe that's a little bit safer if you don't want to post your address. I agree, Matt. Depressing as hell. What are they trying to do here? Exactly. What was the point? What was the point of all this? I feel like somebody just wanted to like leave their mark, show that they did something in Cardano, leave my mark on Cardano. I'm going to revamp the whole constitution, even though, maybe I don't have any experience whatsoever in this kind of thing. I don't even know how to present the changes. I'm just going to do it because I want to leave my mark on Cardano. Very happy to hear that this very important issue are being discussed. The Cardano construction is a very new thing. It will take time for it to evolve. Whatever they're smoking, if it makes you this stupid, I want to at least try it. I wish we could. I don't think the person is stupid. I'll say that. I don't think the person is stupid. They just didn't do this correctly. Yeah, Google Translate. Constitutional remix. We need a parody song. Yeah, exactly. When looking at seemingly inscrutable actions, I prefer to look at the outcome and infer the intent. Exactly. Just look at the outcome. Like, you'll never really know the intent, in most cases, unless it's revealed somehow, somebody, reveals a direct message they got from that person or something secretly, and they, inappropriately reveal it to the public. You'll never really know the intent. So you have to look at the outcome and, like you said, infer the intent. Agreed on default no vote. It should be a default no vote. I came in late, so I missed a lot. Apparently, trying to catch up and understand what they wanted to correct. They just wanted to revamp the Constitution. Now they're claiming it was all kicked off because a constitutional committee member left because they said they would only do it if they got paid. So the proposer is now claiming that the purpose of this was to reduce the burden on the constitutional committee. But I'm like, hey, like 5 different parties stepped up and wanted that seat as soon as the old constitutional committee seat holder left. 5 different parties jumped up and decided to do it, even though they still weren't getting paid. So did we really need to reduce the burden? I don't think so. I think somebody just wanted to leave their mark on the Cardano Constitution and be able to say, I rewrote the Cardano Constitution. That is a terrible reason to do it. Why is the new hall a dead end? Exactly. If you change one thing, you can get a result. If you change 2, you can never verify the results. Exactly. What is the over-under on another revision proposal to revert all these changes stat? So I don't know about when to revert all the changes, but the proposer is already telling people, hey, let's do a 3.0, right? This is the wrong way to do a constitution, right? You don't just like rapidly iterate, right? You can do the move fast and break things thing, maybe if you're building a DApp in your basement, right? You can do that. But this is a multi-billion-dollar fucking ecosystem, right? You can't just decide, hey, I'm an accountant. I'm going to go through the whole fucking constitution and rip shit apart. Like, that's not the right way to do this shit. There you go. Oh, there you go. James is offering more. Can you change it back? I mean, yeah, we could do whatever we want with a governance action. Will people actually vote for it? I don't know, because everybody just voted yes on this shit. Everybody just voted yes. I think the worst is that it actually passed. Yeah, the problem is not that it was proposed, because anybody can make a proposal. If you're willing to put up the deposit, anybody can make a proposal like this. The fact that everybody voted for it is the terrible part, right? And there are some people, we'll get to it. I'm going to cover it. We'll get it. Some people actually want to degrade the constitutional committee. There are some people, I don't think very many, but some today I saw saying they actually want to destroy the constitutional committee. They don't believe in checks and balances. Yeah, that's like that is not being able to copy and paste things in here. If that's the case in the comments, it's like an anti-spam thing. It's not something I'm like choosing for any special reason. Yeah, so it originally came out in August, and I voted no on it in August. This was like version 2.0. I voted no, and then they came back and immediately put another version in. This is version 2.4 or something, and this one passed. Enough people voted no last time, including me, that it did not pass. I voted no again this time, and some other people, and it passed this time. No, they've been working on this since August. Afro on the win. Thanks for joining. Let's go. You can rapidly iterate if the changes are very small and deliberate. This is clearly too wild. Yeah, this is not good. Democracy is overrated. Some people believe that. Some people do believe that. There's an open working group, meaning you don't need to be an Intersect member, that is developing an amendment process. Anyone who thinks is important should join. Yeah, absolutely. Yo, Forerunner 93. Yo, thanks for joining. Malicious intent. We don't know the intent. Oh, super chat. Thank you, James. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. This is I think this is only the like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is only like the 6th super chat ever. So I appreciate that. And I believe you were one of the previous ones too. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you, James. Much appreciated. Let's go. Democracy is an illusion. No, I mean, in this case, I mean, people voted for it, but let's get to, oh, there you go, James. Brown bear. James says brown bear. Mark Going says just joined, moved slowly, just like coding. Don't break things. Yeah, I'm definitely more with you on that. Okay, I'm definitely with you on that. Let's move on. Okay, so this whole thing that Nemu Stake Pool was pointing out yesterday, they also pointed, just like I pointed out the thing about showing the changes. Nemu Pool pointed out exactly this thing back in August as well. Here they have that section that was being deleted. It was already being deleted back in August. They pointed it out back in August, right? But they pointed it out back in August. But, you know, if you can't see the changes, if there's not a document, a marked changes document that shows you the changes, if you choose this other amateur style of showing changes, nobody's going to realize what's going on. But Nemu Pool put this in their rationale for voting no clear back in August. Did any of the DReps notice? No, because they, you couldn't even see the changes. So what did the proposer say about all this? So here's the part I want to point out, that in an article like this, I can't include all of every thread, right? So there's a lot of context that's inevitably going to get lost. And if you want to see the full context behind some of these posts, you can definitely go to the pages of these accounts and find these threads and read the whole thread, because inevitably there's going to be some context lost. To make this readable, I can't include the whole threads, right? So Breja says, sounds like new amendments need to be introduced to unfuck what this did. Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. Close check the first and last 5 characters of the handle. Otherwise, it may not go to the right address. Close check the first and last 5 characters of the handle. Yep, good call. Single issue bills or issues should be the way, not multiple changes in 100 pages. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, this should have been done on a single issue basis, right? But I don't think that's what this person wanted to do. I think this person wanted to be able to say they rewrote the whole Constitution. So that's what they did. And somehow they got it passed. So for his part, the proposer seems to think the opposite of what Nemu Pool, and certainly what I think, and sounds like what a lot of you think. The proposer says this somehow strengthens the Constitutional Committee, even though all of this was lost and it created this problem right here that we just talked about. The proposer is responding, no, we've actually strengthened the Constitutional Committee. He says, no, the Constitutional Committee's powers have actually been strengthened. But the good news is that its workload has been reduced. Not only are all the items required in the budget info action now required at the Treasury withdrawal stage, but even more items have been added that need to be clarified at the Treasury withdrawal stage. Those are those 7 procedural things we went through. They're all dumb. They're dumb procedural things. I mean, it's good they're in there. There's reasons they're in there. They're not actually dumb, but they don't do what we need them to do. They don't do is it against the purpose of the Constitution thing. And here's where he starts explaining his explanation. He starts giving his explanation why this came out. Please keep in mind that this constitutional reform began with a cry from members of the Constitutional Committee. So that's the Constitutional Committee, the one Constitutional Committee seat holder quitting, right? So apparently that view hangs its hat. So he said this is actually making the CC more powerful. The CC's powers have actually been strengthened. Apparently that view hangs its hat on the idea that having to do less means you have more authority. So he's saying because they have to do less now, they have more authority. You guys can tell me, does that make sense to anybody? I can't follow that logic. He says, I find this a bit disappointing. This initiative to amend the Constitution was initiated with the goal of reducing the burden on the CC. My initial motivation for starting Constitution version 2.0 was the argument from several CC members that a single omnibus budget GA governance action, Treasury withdrawal governance action, is necessary because the Constitutional Committee cannot handle a large number of budget governance actions. If there were a large number of governance actions, the CC would no longer be able to do its job. So, he's saying, hey, this is why we didn't do a piecemeal. This is why we did this giant omnibus budget. But that's a reference to the budget, which was a lot. The budget was a lot. That's not a lie. But I don't think we should do the Constitution the way we did that budget. When I saw this argument, I felt that if the Constitutional Committee could no longer manage Cardano governance as intended by the current Constitution, then we need to streamline the Constitution partly to reduce the burden. So there you go. The whole goal was streamline the Constitution. Also, oh, Brian, another super chat. Thank you. I'm tired of these people wasting your time with super chats. That's pretty funny. That's actually pretty funny. Thank you for that. I mean, that definitely makes me laugh. That's actually very funny. Omar Wright says the facies is a symbol of the masses delegating their authority to a representative. That is why they are depicted on the podium in the House of Representatives. Oh, very interesting detail. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And thank you for that super chat, Brian. I do appreciate that very much. Thanks for bringing this up. It's something Charles doesn't bring up. I need to pay attention. Oh, James sent it to you, Brown Beardo. There you go. Dumb question, but what can we do to help? Are we able to vote on anything or just the DReps? Unfortunately, it's just the DReps. You just got to make sure whoever you're delegating to is actually reading the goddamn governance actions. I do not believe they're reading them. I mean, they're probably reading the actual governance action. They're like glancing through it, but they're not looking through the constitutional changes because it was impossible to read through it, right? They should have demanded, hey, this is a bullshit way to show us the changes. Please give us a track changes version. Fascism is when the representatives use the power delegated to them to disenfranchise the people who delegated their power to them. Yeah, true. True. Very true, Omar. Okay, so let's get back to it. He says, DRep's response to the reward amount requested by the CC has made it clear that the CC is currently overloaded and unable to demand a corresponding reward. He's saying that all of us DReps voted no when the Constitutional Committee put forward a motion asking to be paid. You can feel however you want about that, right? People are going to have different opinions on that, and that's okay. Reducing compensation or treating work as unpaid would be unfair to the Constitutional Committee, and reducing the number of members would reduce the diversity of the Constitutional Committee. So I felt that reducing the workload was probably the best option for the Constitutional Committee. So he's saying this is where this came from. He wanted to reduce the workload, but his next leap of logic doesn't make sense to me, right? You can feel however you want about people getting paid, but the next part doesn't make sense. The number of info actions has been reduced, but the items that the CC must review in Treasury withdrawal governance actions has actually been slightly more strictly defined and increased. I don't think it's fair to say that the Constitutional Committee's authority has been weakened. Since the overall workload of the CC has been reduced, while the items that it must review have been redefined, I believe its authority has been strengthened. So it's like, we're taking stuff away from you. You're doing less. That means your authority has been strengthened. I guess as to the few things, it'd be more accurate to say you're going to have more energy per thing you have to do. If he said that, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense at least. It doesn't help your argument. This doesn't make sense. You have more authority, even though we've taken stuff away from you, right? I would say go ask Congress. If we took the power of the purse away from Congress, ask them if they think their authority has been strengthened. They're going to say, hell no, certainly not. This doesn't make sense. This is nonsensical. So can this be fixed? Yeah, NEMU stake pool offered a fix here to this particular little problem, adding a seventh requirement that says the purpose of the withdrawal shall not violate this constitution. And you can write this. There's probably other ways you can draft this language. The purpose of the withdrawal shall not contradict the purpose of this constitution or otherwise violate this constitution or the purposes, laid out, by the Cardano ecosystem, whatever language we're using. There's different ways you could draft that, but there is a fix to this particular problem, right? That's not the bigger problem. The problem here is that the process used to do this was the most inefficient, most inoptimal, most problem-ridden way to do this possible. This is not how we should do this. Obviously, I would support a good fix for this, something along the lines of what NEMU Pool suggested would be a good starting place for that particular problem. But the fact that something can be fixed later doesn't justify creating the problem in the first place. At this point, I have to question, what was the actual goal of this amendment really anyway? Which is the first question a lot of you asked in the comments. You were like, why are we doing this? What is the goal of this? That's my question at this point exactly. I saw today on X that some actually do want to erase the authority of the Constitutional Committee. If you don't believe in checks and balances and governance, that's your prerogative. But I feel confident in saying that most of us believe that checks and balances are absolutely crucial for good governance. I definitely resonate with a lot of the comments people made like these. I hope we don't regret removal of the information action requirement for Treasury withdrawal actions. This was a poor decision without proper debate, in my opinion. Concerns by DReps were not addressed because there wasn't enough voting weight from dissenting opinions. That's exactly what happened with NEMU Pool's concern that I just showed you, and also mine about the way the changes were being presented. We didn't have enough dissenting weight. So none of that was paid attention to. However, Emergo's wanting to change it from ADA holders to uppercase to lowercase ADA owners, that change was made because Emergo has a lot of voting power, right? So I think this is exactly right. I'm more concerned. This poster says, I'm more concerned with how it weakens overall governance. One member of the supposed tripartite governance, the DReps, have been successful in removing some of the balance of power from another member, the CC, by giving themselves no future restrictions on changes to the Constitution, by removing constitutional oversight on the constitutional amendment process. If they want to do something the Constitution prohibits, they can simply just change the Constitution. This wasn't the governance design I signed for. This is a completely different problem in some ways. This is totally another problem, right? We can discuss this conceptually. This is the one that was referenced up above here in the comments. This is another huge problem with this. And you know what? I'm afraid we're going to stumble on a whole bunch more problems. So, it's like you got to ask yourself, there's a lot of costs involved in this. This has created a lot of problems. What was the fucking point? Why were we doing this in the first place? Why were we doing this? Is it really just chance that the biggest single person DRep by a huge margin created this amendment that by pure coincidence potentially strikes down the authority of the main check and balance outside of the DReps? I find that hard to swallow. Let's face it, if this DRep, along with Yoroi and Emergo and a few others, push something, there's a good chance it's going to pass. Just those 3 DReps accounted for 1.4 billion in voting power in this vote. There's how much voting power they had according to Tempo Vote. Those three DReps. Many DReps won't vote against that concentration of voting power for fear of inciting their wrath when it's time to vote on that particular DRep's own pet projects. Very difficult to overcome that, especially if the check and balance of the Constitutional Committee is potentially hamstrung and crippled by an amendment like this. So I see this as a huge step in the wrong direction, right? And my biggest question is, why the hell did we do this? Like, it created all these problems. Why did we even do this, right? What was the purpose of this? And all I can figure is that somebody decided, I want to revise the Constitution. I want to rewrite the Constitution. I want to leave my fingerprints on this thing so I can go around for the rest of my life and tell people I rewrote the Constitution of Cardano. That is not a valid reason for doing this. Okay. Mark says, that's why you're my DRep. You take the time to read and understand and not wasteful. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Family G's leaving their handle there. Welcome. Put a bet in if that's your thing. Try double. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know. I'm not following that. The interpretation makes all the difference. Yep. Damn, who let Palpatine run a stake pool? Let's request a reversal. Isn't this an unforeseen example of centralization? This is absolutely, I mean, just the fact that we have this like voting block of DReps that, I mean, there's only like 4.49 yes votes cast in this vote. And we ended up with this voting block that had, what did I say, 1.4 billion, right, out of 4.5. So yeah, this is centralization. This is like centralization. And Matt points out they worked on the original Constitution for years. Yeah, it wasn't just some dude who decided to use Google Translate to move a bunch of stuff around and delete words he didn't like, throw commas in there. There's a lot of like really arbitrary changes in there that are totally stylistic. And I'm like, who the hell is changing the Constitution just because they want to see, commas in certain places that the original version didn't have it? That's not a legit reason to change the Constitution. Guinness Speak says, we want a do-over. James says, Dr. Doke says is giving his handle, but not if you're drunk. James says he's leaving work. Matt's talking about motorcycles. Yeah. Don't get me started. This is too serious. We can't talk about motorcycles right now. Changing the Constitution should be the hardest governance action to do. It needs to be timeless and as protected from the whims of the flippant majority as possible. Absolutely. It should be hard to change the Constitution. It shouldn't be, the biggest single person DRep just decided they want some changes, right? That shouldn't be the reason. And a little bit of it, there's sort of different philosophical approaches, because some people, I know eventually people are going to argue, oh, this is the constant improvement thing. You should constantly be trying to iterate and improve everything, right? And definitely in certain cultures, there's, more focus on that than in others. But the Constitution is not something you want to just like iterate with experimentally, right? The Constitution should be predictable. In in economies, you see more investment if the laws are predictable, right? Especially the Constitution. If the Constitution isn't predictable, if it might change from year to year, if a new administration comes in, or a new, biggest DRep comes in and they just decide to change it, it should be predictable what the Constitution is going to look like. It shouldn't be something that's changed on a whim without most of the DReps even understanding what they're doing. That's absolutely not. You have to have predictable laws to attract capital. If your laws are not predictable, you will not attract capital. It is still holding around 34 cents. Yeah, you can change your vote. You can change your vote. You can. Sadly, the deadline has passed. The deadline has passed. Seems Cardano is susceptible to a constitutional attack. Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is convince those biggest DReps to go for it. If they had nefarious intentions, then it is now harder to undo. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, somebody go to the proposer of this and tell him you want to undo it. See what he says about that. Punctuation matters. We have talked about this in the past. I want to thank my parents, Mother Teresa, and the Pope. The serial comma in there changes the meaning of, some of you will call that an Oxford comma or a Harvard comma, but the addition of that serial comma changes the meaning of that for sure. So punctuation does matter. I remember Charles signing the Constitution with others. It was a major event. Yeah, Constitutional Convention was a really big deal. Hard to make the Constitution. People are saying, yeah, it was hard to make and it should be hard to change. I think that's a fair, that is a fair, fair thing to say. So anyways, I think the most important thing here is we've got to fix that problem with the sort of rescission of the Constitutional Committee's power. I think we also need to insist on red lines whenever anybody's changing one of the important documents in Cardano. Like, the DReps really need to understand what the fuck they're voting on, and they're just not going to do it. Let's be realists here. They're not going to create their own changes tracked document. They're not going to copy and paste, they're going to go find their own original version and a version of the new one, and then put those into, MS Word docs and do a compare document thing. They're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it. Let's be realistic. So we need to insist on red lines in the future. I think that's important. So let's move along. Yeah, predictability. Matt says, yeah, I thought it was one and done. Nope. This DRep decided to change everything. So let's move along a little bit here. So J. Marie sent this. Thank you, J. Marie, for tagging me in this. This was quite interesting. So this was about Steak and Shake. It says, starting March 1st, Steak and Shake will give all hourly employees at its company-operated restaurants a Bitcoin bonus of 21 cents for every hour worked. Employees will be able to collect their Bitcoin pay after a 2-year vesting period. Thank you, Fold app, for the assist. We take care of our employees. They in turn take care of customers, and the results take care of themselves. I love to see this, right? Of course, we would always wish it was more. We want them to have more than a 21-cent bonus, but it's a bonus. It's just on top of what they're already earning. They have to stick around for 2 years, but hey, all these kinds of, outlets like this, they have these employees that stick around for years and years and years. And I think it's quite charming to think about the idea of some employee who works there, probably not making a ton of money, depends on geographic location, but who knows? Maybe if they work there, maybe somebody who, somehow ends up working there for 10 years, maybe at the end of that 10 years, they have an amount of Bitcoin that's worth quite a bit of money. The history of Bitcoin would seem to indicate that could be possible. So I think that's that one is very interesting. Okay, so this was what the mainstream media has been calling a charm offensive. Speaking of charm, a charm offensive by Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, CEO of Coinbase in Davos. And you've got your usual anchors there, and they're asking Brian some pretty funny questions. Like in this particular video, the anchor is asking Brian, um, hey, you keep saying that, the stablecoin, the crypto companies should be able to use stablecoins to compete on an equal playing field with the banks in TradFi. And the way we can do that is by letting the stablecoins pay a yield. And so then the banks compete with the stablecoin yield. The yield on bank accounts competes with the stablecoin yield. And the interviewer, the anchor says, but what about the moats of all these companies? Wouldn't that destroy their moats? And Brian Armstrong, super smart here, he says, the anchor says, what would be the result of destroying the moats of all these companies? Right. And he's like alarmed. It's probably faux alarm, but he acts like he's alarmed by it. And Brian Armstrong is like, uh, the end result would be that it's better for the customer. And he's just kind of like stunned and sort of laughing to himself. Like the end result, what's going to happen is it's going to be better for the customers. The banks aren't going to get this giant yield. They will lose that moat, but it's going to be much better for the customers. And he gives like a series of interviews. There's like quite a few interviews, and the tone of all of them is kind of the same. People asking him the exact same kind of questions, like, what about this stablecoin yield issue? And the thing he keeps coming to is like, what do you think is better for the customers? Like, should the banks be able to collect this giant amount of interest on your money? And he straight up says, what's happening is they're doing fractional reserve banking, and stable coins have to be one-to-one backed. There's no fractional reserve banking going on with stable coins by the crypto entities. So in fractional reserve banking, these banks are taking your money and they're lending it out without your permission. They're collecting this giant amount of interest and they're giving you a tiny part of it, 0%, 0.5%, and they're getting, somewhere on the order of like 3%. And, it's like when you hear him say it, you're like, as a crypto person, you're like, of course, that's what we're doing. And the anchors are all like, wait, is that how it works? Is that what's going on? You mean fractional reserve banking is not as good for the customer? These banks are making this crazy money and just, basically the customer is getting shafted on this. Is that what's going on? Um, and it's like interview after interview of the same thing. Emilio says, I wanted to be the one to change the Constitution, but I couldn't do better, so I just fucked it up. I mean, that's kind of what happened from my perspective. Making me hungry now, dude. Steak and shake. Yep. Yep. No, no, we need to implore. I might have called it, hopefully I didn't call it shake and bake. I might have called it shake and bake when we were talking about it, but it is indeed steak and shake. So we need to implore the tempos and gov tools to present constitutional changes the same way you presented AOS. So they can't. The proposer, I mean, they could, right? But then we'd have to rely on them to do it, and that puts a lot of burden on them. The proposer needs to do it, right? Because you notice even in this proposal, there was a PDF included. All you have to do is make that track changes version in MS Word or whatever word processor you want. And then, they were able to make a PDF of the final version. Just push the button that says track changes and make a PDF of the track changes. It's like the proposer needs to do it. And we as DReps just need to vote no if the proposer won't do that, because we don't know. Maybe it wasn't nefarious, but I swear to God, in any other part of my life, if I got that as the document showing the changes, automatically assume nefarious intent. I would definitely assume nefarious intent. The only reason you do that is if you don't want people to actually understand the changes. That's the reason you do that. I guess this guy is burning credibility. Good to cut the grass and see the snakes early. Yep. I'm not saying anybody's a snake, but I'm saying there's no reason to present changes like that unless you don't want people to understand it. Brian Armstrong is Mr. Clean. He is. Man, it's amazing how, uniformly pale he is. Like I can never figure out if this dude is just wearing sunblock all the time or if he just never goes in the sun, probably a combination of the two, but he stays very uniformly pale. Guinness Speaks, time to go horizontal. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. This is AOS Rocks. Thank you for saying that. Should be a standard format and scope for changes and proposals. Absolutely. I mean, it is the standard. Globally, it's the standard for all legal changes. This is how it's always done. Phil says, thank you, AOS, for your article and follow-up live stream. I was feeling down about it, the Constitution change, but you've made me optimistic. There's still some in the community who care. I definitely care, and I really appreciated you guys publishing your rationale for voting no as a Constitutional Committee member. That seeing your vote also made me optimistic. So thank you for that. Matt says, we've been too hooked on banks for way too long. Time to cut the cord. Yep, agree. Omar Wright is assigning it to nefarious intent. It's hard. It's hard to say it's not nefarious intent, right? When it's the biggest single person DRep proposing a document and going after it so aggressively, pushing it so hard, and the end result being that the one big check and balance outside of the DReps is degraded, right? It favors the biggest DReps. It takes away a check and balance on them. Of course, it's to their benefit. So it's hard not to wonder if this wasn't nefarious intent, right? So back to Brian Armstrong's comments, though. I thought this was good. Perianne boring. I've seen, crypto people back in the day. There was one particular podcast. I believe it was her. They like eviscerated her on an issue. They like brought her on their podcast, and they were not nice at all. So it's nice to see, and she is part of the Digital Chamber of Commerce. That's what she calls it, the Digital Chamber of Commerce. So it's nice to see a post like this, right? And actually, people kind of go after her on one little thing we'll cover. But she says banks earn approximately 5.7% risk-free at the Fed. That's the part that people rightly went after her on, but we'll cover that. They pay you 0.1 to 0.5% on savings. That spread is policy enabled. The yield goes to banks, not you. Since 2008, banks have been paid trillions in interest on reserves, funds that otherwise could have reduced the federal deficit. Now those same banks are trying to kill the market structure bill to crypto companies, so crypto companies can't pay you interest on stablecoins. This isn't about safety. It's about preserving a monopoly on yield. Voters will remember the politicians who chose bank profits or your right to earn. She is highlighting the right thing. This delta, this spread is too damn big. The spread is too damn high. The banks are taking all of it. Brian Armstrong is trying to come in and pay you something in the threes, which is much better than this sub one. He knows. He's like, hey, 2% in profit for us is plenty. But actually, her number is not quite right? Down here, James Seifert, who is a part of Bloomberg Intelligence. He points out, serious question, how are banks earning 1.5x the Fed funds rate? I mean, the spread between the Fed funds rate at 3.75 and what you're paying is still bad. Agree 100% the sentiment, though. Is this just a typo? And she says, she meant at the peak of the last cycle, banks earn north of 5% risk-free at the Fed. Today, it's around 3.7%. So really, she should have said 3.7% instead of 5.7. But I think her point still holds, and it's the same point that Brian Armstrong's making. So good job, Perianne Boring. Okay, back to more accuracy. So I feel bad. I feel bad when when we have to, not even poke holes, not rain on anybody's parade, but when you have to point out something, when everybody's exuberant about something, I always feel bad when you have to point out something that, is not as good about that thing. So we're going to do that right now. But first, does single person DRep mean it's just some dude's massive person? No. It means it's a single person who's a DRep. The other biggest DReps are all entities. They're all entity based, like Emergo, Yoroi Wallet. It's like a big wallet platform or a big founding entity like Emergo. So the other largest DReps are those kinds of entity based DReps. And this one is a dude, but he has delegators. It's not all his money. He has delegators. Matt says, throwback. I used to cash my weekly checks at a bar, completely bypass the bank. I remember those days. I'm also old enough to remember when you could just go to regular stores and they would cash your check. So I remember those days. It's wild to think about now. Hard to see it otherwise. I made an exclamation instead of question because of your repetition of that point. Punctuation. Good call. Fair enough. Fair enough, Omar. Well played. Well played. Definitely. James says, I had no data on my ride home from work. What are the two handles? So give James those two handles that you guys wanted to give to him. I'm assuming this is James and it's not some perpetrator that has taken over his account and is doing some kind of identity fraud, some kind of crypto identity fraud on you guys of some type. So hopefully it's actually James's account. It seems to be him, but who knows? Okay, so this news also hit today. So here we go. Just in, nearly 1 billion Telegram users are about to access fully private AI. Midnight has just announced a strategic partnership with Alpha Ton Capital, that's Telegram, Alpha Ton Capital to launch the Ton part is Telegram, to launch the first fully privacy preserving AI agents on Telegram. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that this entity is a part of Telegram. I don't know the relationship. But Ton represents, that's the ticker of the Telegram crypto thing. So a messaging platform with nearly 1 billion users worldwide. You guys know what Telegram is. By integrating Midnight's privacy enhancing infrastructure with Ton and Telegram's Cocoon AI, this initiative sets a new benchmark for confidential AI, enabling users to interact with advanced AI while ensuring their personal data remains private and fully under their control. This collaboration demonstrates that decentralized privacy is no longer just a concept, but is now ready to scale across real-world ecosystems. So whenever I see something like this, I always ask myself, okay, everybody's real excited about this. And it sounds cool. Like anytime any big platform with a lot of users wants, when we've got something going on with them, it's pretty exciting. Here's another one directly from Midnight. We're excited to announce a landmark agreement with Alpha Ton Capital to launch the first fully privacy preserving AI agents for Telegram's nearly 1 billion users. Sounds awesome. Give me 1 billion users. I love it. But I'm like, I actually don't know who the hell this is. I know what Telegram is. I know that Ton is this cryptocurrency ecosystem, related to Telegram. I don't know what Alpha Ton Capital is. So I just did a little search of Alpha Ton Capital. Streetwise says, haha, cashing a check at a bar is danger zone. It would be these days. I wouldn't do it these days, but back in the day, it wasn't just bars. You could go to grocery stores. They would cash your checks. Weird stores like that would just cash your check. It was wild. Yeah. You can go to Tempo Vote and look at it. And yeah. Almost every. In fact, we can pull it up. I'll pull it up in a second. AI and privacy are not a good mix. That's a legit point. Frazek, that's a legit point, man. That's a legit point, dude. So I was curious though, what is Alpha Ton Capital? So I did a little searching around for Alpha Ton Capital and I found this. Alpha Ton Capital had made this post. Big news, Alpha Ton Capital is making a historic 30 million strategic investment in Anduril. And I was like, oh, Anduril, I'm interested in Anduril. This is kind of cool. What is this? And then I saw this down here, readers added context. Oh no, they got community noted. And the reason they got community noted is because Palmer Luckey, who of course is the head of Anduril, said this: Alpha Ton is lying. This is not true. Public heads up to CEO Brittany Kaiser. And I guess maybe that's her handle. Yep. You do not have permission to use my trademarks to defraud your investors. So I'm not saying any of this is true. I'm just saying this is what Palmer Luckey seems to have written right there. So she came back and she said, hey, Palmer Luckey, we signed an agreement to purchase economic exposure to Anduril shares through an SPV and to accumulate more exposure over time and offer access via a formal secondaries product given our network's demand for your innovative tech. I will issue a clarification. Palmer Luckey said, that isn't what you and your company said, though. To be extremely clear, Anduril has to authorize these types of transfers, and I will not authorize it. To be clear, you said, making Alpha Ton the first publicly traded company to hold shares of the leading defense technology innovator. So here we have a case. Let's see, is that from this? Let's see, maybe that's from a different actual post, but he definitely replied to this post. This unprecedented investment positions AlphaTon at the forefront of next generation. So this is kind of interesting. So they made this big announcement, and Palmer Luckey is taking issue with the way they announced it. And it looks like I'm guessing, let's see, did she say she's the CEO? Does she agree with Palmer Luckey's? Yep, CEO AlphaTon Capital. So he disagrees with what she's saying and doesn't even like her using his trademarks, using his names. So that makes me ask some questions. So this was just last month. This was December 16th, 2025. This makes me ask some questions, about AlphaTon Capital. This makes my little lobster antenna go up. Makes me a little worried about AlphaTon Capital. So I'm sure there was a lot more than this. I'm sure we can dig into this and find out more about what was said here. In fact, let's see if she responded to Palmer Luckey here. She responded back to him. I don't see a response back from her. She did, to her credit though, she did already say, hey, I will issue a clarification, but man, what she describes here, they're accumulating exposure over time to Anduril. I mean, when I read this up here, this makes me think, oh, it's a strategic investment that Anduril is at least aware of. A strategic investment of 30 million. We're investing in the future of defense tech. This is a strategic bet on the companies building the future. This unprecedented investment positions them at the forefront of the next generation defense technology. Full announcement in Thread. It's like, maybe nothing in here, is directly contradicted by what she's saying. But I definitely took from this something different than what she's saying down here. I definitely assumed something different up here than what she's saying actually occurred down here. And it definitely didn't make Palmer Luckey happy. So anyways, we'll see what comes of this whole thing with AlphaTon and Midnight. I hope this is like an isolated event, and maybe Palmer Luckey just doesn't like them for some reason. And, maybe nothing they said here is actually untrue. Who knows? But that's what I was able to find today on AlphaTon Capital. So I think that is about everything. That's about everything I could find in the news today. Let's get the rest of the comments here. You have not lived unless you clubbed around. Ever go out with friends to have a drink? That's a response to cashing a check at a bar is danger zone for me. Streetwise says, I worked at a bar, and after the shift, we'd usually go to another bar, aka my dollars didn't make it home. Yeah, I know that. Well, a lot of the industry people end up spending all their money at those industry nights anyways. And going to your friend's bar after working at your bar is kind of like a little mini industry night. I like a drink at Christmas in the summer when it's hot, and an ice cold beer sounds really good. I'm a guy. Yep, that all sounds good. I don't drink the beer anymore because the carnivore thing, but I once did, and I enjoyed them very much. Okay. I used to watch football games with my best friends too and have a drink. Now it's rare and has to be a special occasion. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that happens to all of us. Telegram just makes me think of the bots of the chats my brother wanted to show me, all batshit conspiracy evidence. Yeah, that's true. My problem with Telegram, aside from, information about who may or may not be controlling Telegram and what may be contained within Telegram, aside from that whole part of it, it is a little 4chan-y. It is a little 4chan-y. I guess we say 4chan-y. It is a little 4chan-y. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in Telegram. That's true for sure. James says, have a good night and a good day, everyone. You too, James. Thanks for coming by. Omar Wright, good night and thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining tonight. As always, I appreciate everybody coming by. Yeah, we'll see what happens going forward. We definitely don't want Cardano to turn into a banana republic, but probably step one of that is people not just deciding to change shit up because they want to rewrite some shit. And also, presenting changes in a way that people can actually read them. All of that would be super helpful. So hopefully things get better on that front going forward. Hopefully the DReps, if you can't actually read the changes, please vote no. Your default vote on changing the Constitution should be no, unless you 110% understand the changes. I do not believe that most of the DReps really understood the changes. But anyways, hopefully things get better going forward. I hope everybody's having a great week, and I will talk to you soon.